This is a streaming audio check. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Hank Stevenson, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so that voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested general election have been invited to participate in this debate. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state asking for questions for candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. This survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Agenda, the Arizona Capital Times, the Green Valley News and Sun, have been used to utilized to guide the discussion so it best serves the voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you, the voter. So voters that are watching this debate tonight, you can submit a question at any time. You can do that via email, debates@kc-a.com. You can text it in to 480-808-1814, or you can call them in to 480-937-1253. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplication, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. This debate is scheduled for about an hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Tonight, we'll be hearing from some of the candidates in Legislative District 29, which covers Surprise, El Mirage, Luke Air Force Base, and Litchfield Park. The candidates that are with us tonight are David Raymer, a Democrat seeking the state Senate, and Scott Podine, a Democrat seeking the state House. Janae Shamp, Austin Smith, Steve Montenegro are the Republicans running for Legislative District 29, and they chose not to be here tonight. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so the electorate may vote informed. All right, gentlemen, your opening statements, and let's start with you, Scott. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening. My name is Scott Podine. I'm a retired Air Force sergeant. I was a weapons loader and aircraft mechanic, and I served in 2 conflicts, the war in Kosovo against Serbia, and also attacking targets in northern Iraq in 1998. Neither one of my opponents can say that. One is a disgraced former state senator. The other, I don't know much about except he's running a dark money PAC. I know how to work hard. I know the long hours. I have never served for money or power. I've served the people who must always come first. I always put the lives of my load crew and the people that were working for me and with me before my own needs. That's why I still live by my core values of duty, honor, integrity, and service before self. I don't have an agenda other than serving the people of my district and the people of Arizona and following the Constitution that I swore to uphold 40 years ago.
Thank you, Scott. David, take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi there, I'm David Raymer, and I'm the candidate for Arizona State Senate, LD29, and I'm very proud to be on the ballot on November 8th. I got into the race a little bit late because of the redistricting. I think it took a lot of people a while to figure out what was going on. And so I was on the primary as a write-in candidate. And all I had was me and my printer at home and some business cards. And I just went and gave those flyers to as many people as I could. And I doubled the amount necessary to get on the regular ballot. and my candidate, Janae Champ, she also got in the 700s, like I did. The write-in candidates were required to get as many write-in votes as the regular candidates were required to get petition signatures, and so it was almost the same. She had a huge amount of money behind her, and she still does. I'm actually doing a grassroots campaign and just interested in representing the people of Arizona and for all the issues that we face here, and especially hoping that some kind of normalcy can be returned to state politics here. Arizona has a reputation for people getting along with each other, I think, and we're used to having all different kinds of people here. And I think there's a strength there, and we don't want all this negativity being imported from Washington, D.C., trying to get people to hate each other based on their political beliefs and associations. So I would really like to do my best, if I'm elected, to extend my hand to people also on the opposite end of the aisle and see if we can work together. And I would promise, if I'm elected, to fully read and consider any bill, no matter who the writer was and what party they come from, and consider if it's a good bill or not based on that alone. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. So let's get to some questions from voters. And I don't expect this to be a sharp debate, considering the two of you are Democrats. But feel free, if you disagree with your colleague here, jump in there. If you want to add to it, jump in there. But let's start with a couple of questions about the economy, generally speaking. Arizonans are suffering some of the highest inflation rates in the country. What can you, as a state lawmaker, do to ease some of that inflation and its burdens on Arizona families? And Scott, why don't you take us off?
Well, first of all, one of the reasons why I saw on 12 News tonight that gas prices in Phoenix and the Valley are over 80 cents higher than they are in Tucson. And we have to look at what is probably one of the driving costs of that. It's price gouging. There currently isn't a lot on the books in the state to go after price gougers and protect consumers. The oil companies will complain, well, we don't have enough refining capability, but the fact of the matter is it's price gouging. They're just trying to keep making up the money that they lost during the pandemic. I can understand making up losses, and I can understand profits and maintaining your profit margins. But if you're having a profit margin that's 100%, you're gouging. If you're over 50% on your margins, you're gouging. We need to protect consumers from the price gouging. And it's also a combination of the statewide gas tax, which is 18 cents per gallon, and also sales taxes that vary throughout the valley, and also the county sales tax. So depending on what city you're in, you're going to see a difference of price. But still, we're way above the national average. And I'm not buying the excuses that they're giving. It doesn't make sense that we're paying as much as California is, and they have much higher taxes than we do. One of the first things I do as member of the House, if elected, is to put forth price gouging legislation to protect our consumers. I'm a retired NCO. I live on a fixed income. I know what Arizona families are going through because I'm feeling that pain too. Every time I look down at my check and at the end of the month, I'm happy if I got 3 digits left in there. Thank you.
Okay. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I've actually noticed many times in my life, my adult life, when gas prices have gotten really high for one reason or another, there's usually some disruption in the oil supply in the Middle East or somewhere else. This case in Russia and Ukraine, which are both big gas producers. But so that's the barrel price raises slightly, And then as a result, gas companies just start raising pump prices from there. Excuse me. And then they realize people are still buying it. So they just keep on raising it and raising it. And if I remember correctly, the barrel prices are lower now than they were before this gas price crisis started. And every time in my life, when the gas prices have gotten ridiculously high like that, Congress has threatened price gouging hearings, and then the prices magically go down before the hearings start. And that's happened at least 4 times in my life. So they actually made a little noise about price gouging hearings early this year, right before prices went down, and it worked like usual. But unfortunately, they didn't follow up with them, so the prices are still high and seem to be floating up again in my area. But obviously the driving force of the gas prices and also the inflation is COVID supply chain issues, and they're not just in the U.S. They're worldwide. All kind of industries are short-staffed, and there's a ripple effect. And then you throw into that the chaos of a war in Eastern Europe is going to affect all these things. So they are starting to come down again. Luckily, Joe Biden released the emergency reserves that brought the price down some. The threat of price gouging hearings brought it down some, and hopefully, I think inflation is going to automatically follow and start to decrease as soon as that problem is fixed, because they're all interconnected. Thank you.
One thing with what David was saying is we live in a hydrocarbon-based economy. Everything is priced according to how much it costs to fuel up. If it costs more money to move goods from point A to B, then those shipping companies are going to have to raise their rates for transport, and then the stores, and then everybody else, and it just builds like a snowball going down a hill. So with the control that the oil companies, especially the local distributors, maintaining their hold on prices, and people are still driving, they're going, okay, we'll just keep jacking this price up or keeping it higher than it should be. It's pure and simple greed. That's all I can say. It's greed.
So let's move on to the housing market. Same question, essentially. What can you as a state lawmaker, citizens of Arizona are seeing their rents, their prices of new homes skyrocketing. What can the Arizona State Legislature, and what would you specifically propose to get this problem under control? David, why don't you take a crack at this one first? Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Arizona was always known for an affordable housing market until recently, and when prices were going up somewhat. But when COVID started, the last thing in the world I expected was for prices to go up like crazy. I assumed the economy would be weak and the prices might come down, but again, the supply chain, I think, was the driver of that. And so the supply chain led to less houses being built. So now you've got a double, people are staying home more in their houses and more in their apartments. And the supply of homes and apartments is going down and down. And the ones that normally would have been built weren't built, as this area and economy continues to grow and large numbers of people have moved here. So they're all trying to squeeze into the same market, and that creates a supply and demand issue. And of course, home prices are going to go up from that. Most of the big housing market crashes in my life have been when they overbuilt, and there was a hot market, and they built such a crazy amount of houses that they flooded the supply with too many of them. So I guess it's a question. Everybody's saying, is the housing market going to crash? Well, it's going to adjust at some point, but the supply of houses hasn't gone up, except maybe slightly. So I think based on that, there's not going to be a real estate market crash anytime soon. Unfortunately, that spilled over into the rental market, plus the power of electricity going on. The power companies are raising prices left and right here in my area, and our bill is now $200 more than it was a couple of years ago, and we have solar. So that's not helping matters either. So I have a lot of friends who are working class and two income families, and some on a disability and fixed incomes, and some of them just can't pay $200 and $300 and $500 more per month for rent, which the owners of their places are asking them to rent. I know at least one couple that were kicked out of their house and were in the homeless shelter briefly, and she died of a heart attack in a tent that was 120 degrees. So there are real victims to this problem. We need to do more to help those people, and there's lots of states that have some sort of price controls in place to keep prices just from being raised willy-nilly. And I think they could have that here in Arizona without damaging the housing market or the ability of owners to make profits on them.
Are you talking about rent control, David?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Scott, your thoughts? What do we do about the housing market?
Part of the increase in new housing prices comes from, yes, David, a supply chain issue, but the supply chain issue happened in British Columbia. The tree farms that the lumber manufacturers own and harvest from were hit with I'm not sure if it was a fungus or a disease, but a lot of the trees got wiped out. So that's why you had, even though the pandemic was going on full throttle, you saw those really high jumps in lumber prices because they had to cut down the trees and they had to clear out a lot of trees, and they couldn't use it for lumber because of the fungus or the disease that was in the trees. Affordable housing and rents, again, we're looking at greed. And we're also looking at substandard wages. People just simply working one or two jobs that are paying $22 an hour just simply cannot afford to live in a $2,000 a month apartment and then have money for food, power, and all their other utilities, let alone your car, your insurance, because you have to have rental insurance and everything else. And again, it was people are buying up these houses faster than they could build them, and it started becoming a bidding war. And this is where the greed comes in with the builders. They were just, every week, houses were going up 50,000, 100,000. My son, when he bought his house, he paid a little over 300,000 for it. And people were paying $450 for the same house that he had built. So that's where I'm saying the greed comes in. And once again, we don't have consumer protections in the state. The Republican Party, with their ties to the builders, the realtors, the chambers of commerce, they benefit when those people are making a lot more money. Arizonans benefit when the legislature has the spine and the backbone to say, yeah, no more, time out, that's enough. We need to be able to regulate these industries. People don't like the word regulation, but regulations protect consumers and they protect people and they protect the environment. And right now we don't have the water for the continued development as fast as it's going. I think that we need to start tapping the brakes on the development until we can have a secure water plan for the next 40, 50 years. Because if we do nothing, the kids that are in elementary school are so badly damaged, and their home, their life is going to be not very good. I mean, it's almost like thinking about post-apocalyptic. You can see in my picture, that's from Kuwait. Kuwait is by far the hottest place I'd ever been. I was there in the summer out of Davis Mountain. And it was 150 degrees on the flight line with the asphalt and everything else. Out on the rest of the base is 130. Trust me, folks, you don't want to live in 130-degree temperatures. So the housing and affordable housing, rent control, it's all tied into a big system that needs to be regulated and monitored to where we have free enterprise, but not free enterprise at the cost of lives. Thank you.
Okay, and that leads into the next question. Probably the number one question we get from voters is about Airbnbs. Here's one that came in from a voter. Do you think investors should be able to operate commercial hospitality businesses in residential neighborhoods? What do you plan to do to help us residents? Do you think unsupervised hotels should be allowed to operate in residentially zoned neighborhoods? It goes on and on and on. I would like to hear both of your plans for dealing with Arizona's short-term rentals, if you have one. And I think we started with David last time. So Scott, you want to kick us off? We can just kind of rotate.
Well, the way I look at it, the owners of these Airbnbs and Vibes or whatever else they are responsible for the conduct of their guests. If their guests are having a loud party, disturbing neighbors, then there needs to be legislation to fine those people. And the people that are responsible for creating the noise should be blacklisted off of those websites. But the property owner bears ultimate responsibility. And if they're getting complaints, they should be able to file information, paperwork for an investigation into those noise complaints and then adjudicate as necessary. And if they have to, shut it down.
David, thoughts on the Airbnb economy?
Yeah, I'd say this is just sort of a symptom of the larger gig economy. In my opinion, if those neighborhoods are not zoned for businesses, then people shouldn't be operating businesses out of them. I'm a chiropractor, and there are chiropractors that have home businesses, and to my knowledge, I couldn't do that here because it's not zoned for business. Well, just making a gig thing out of it doesn't make that any different, I don't think. We have business districts in all of our cities for a reason. If they want to open a hotel, they should go open a hotel. And the people that bought homes in that neighborhood bought them with the understanding that it would be a residential neighborhood with children and schools and things like that. And they've got their kids going to school on bicycles and on foot. And if there's wild people there to party their brains out, that could make it unsafe for them too. So there ought to be major liability issues for anybody who is causing a disturbance in a neighborhood like this. And yeah, there should be a special licensing for it of some kind, and not just it's my house now and I'll do whatever I want with it.
Okay. I want to talk about a couple of healthcare questions. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned the Roe versus Wade precedent on abortion access. A question I like to ask Democrats on this is, what parameters to abortion, if any, do you think should be justified? What kind of restrictions, if any, to abortions would you support? And
I think I'm first on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very contentious and emotional issue for a lot of people. Obviously, Roe versus Wade has been law since as long as I can remember, nearly. But there's been a lot of changes since then too, especially in the technical world. So Roe was defeated, I guess, or repealed, and my hope is that a better law will come out for it. I always thought that the privacy issue was a little weak, and that was part of the the justification that they defeated it on, I think it should be more have to do with personal safety and your own personal right to plan your life and have life, liberty, and happiness however you want, not just based it on medical privacy, though that's an issue too. So when they defeated it, quite a few states have automatically enacted these laws that made abortion completely legal in all circumstances. And I'm sure they've already had cases of women dying because they couldn't get access to an abortion when they need one, and the hospitals don't know what to do. There's no clear directive in place for when emergency abortion is justified and when it's not, and that's gonna result in lost lives of women. So, so interesting that the Republicans realized that it's a losing issue for them, and they were getting negatively affected in their polls because of it. So suddenly they came out with an abortion bill, and they're calling it Democrats are calling it a total ban, but to my understanding, it is allowing abortion to be legal until 15 weeks. And as far as I know, that law would force Republican states that have made abortion illegal to make it legal again up to 15 weeks. So that has to be seen as some kind of positive movement. I think the number of weeks should be more than that. But on the other hand, 50 years ago, a woman finding out she was pregnant was a long and complicated process involving expensive tests at the medical doctor and killing a rabbit, I think, even back in those days. So now there are dollar store tests that a woman can know in 5 minutes if she's pregnant or not. So I think it is reasonable to expect the time frame to shorten and not be 6 months anymore. And personally, I think 4 months would be a reasonable compromise to make with Republicans that are trying to pass a bill like this. So that might not be a popular opinion among some Democrats, but I feel like it's a lot more humane, still gives women a chance to get an abortion when they need one, still allows time for rape and incest, and that all abortions would be ironclad later in cases of serious danger to the woman or serious fetal abnormalities inconsistent with life. And I think that's a workable compromise. And I think that's where we're going to end up.
Okay. And Scott, your thoughts? Where should we as a society at all, or if at all, put restrictions on abortion?
Well, I think, and I'd need to talk to OBGYNs about this, but sometime in the second trimester, unless there's a condition with the fetus to where it's unsurvivable, it has an unsurvivable condition, say a hole in the heart, the skull hadn't fully formed, a condition where they've carried to term, the baby's going to die. There's no doubt about it, or if the woman's going to die. I think somewhere in the second trimester is probably appropriate. The 14th Amendment, I agree with the late Justice Bader Ginsburg when she said that Roe v. Wade should have been attached to the Equal Protection Clause, because men have access to reproductive operations and treatments, and now women do not have access to their own reproductive health and healthcare decisions, which the justices that were very crafty in their lies to the Senate and said, oh yeah, Roe v. Wade, yeah, that's set law, turned around and just pivoted, and they went with their religious and political ideologies to overturn Roe. We need to remember that the First Amendment, separation of church and state, also applies to elected officials, appointed officials, and judges. When we walk in the door of the State House, we got to leave our religion and our ideologies behind. I have to be as apolitical as possible, being objective, evaluating all the different aspects of a bill before I can vote on it. And religion definitely will not be part of that thought process. But women have the right, constitutional right, also with the state, for legal access to abortion. The law that Attorney General Brnovich is using is an incompatible law with the state constitution, because in the state constitution, it says that you cannot discriminate against classes of citizens. Women are a class of citizen, and they are being discriminated against. And the old law is unconstitutional. Plus, also, Arizona has the right to privacy, stipulation in the state constitution. But I'm not a medical professional. I'd have to, like I said, consult with medical professionals as to a cutoff for abortion unless it's medically necessary.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about COVID. I'd like to know how each of you thought Arizona managed the pandemic. What kind of a grade would you give the state of Arizona? And if you can tell us one aspect of the pandemic that our leaders did well in managing, and one area where you think they did especially poorly.
Okay. The vaccine rollout and distribution, A+. A+. The messaging coming from Dr. Chris and Governor Ducey, D. We had too many politicians just playing politics with people's lives. And people died because of that. You know, there's times when we need to come together as a nation like we did in World War II. And during 9/11, when we come together, we can get things done. I was, like the picture says, I was in the Air Force for 20 years. You think wearing that little cloth mask is inconvenient? Try wearing a gas mask and loading up all those bombs and missiles on that airplane wearing a gas mask. It's not much fun. So this absolutely insane idea of I won't wear this mask. Come on. It may protect you, it may protect somebody else. A friend of mine, his wife passed from COVID because they didn't get vaccinated and they were lax on the masks. Masks help save lives. The vaccine saved lives. I know that a lot of people will blame Dr. Fauci, but as a nurse scientist, the science is always fluid. You go, okay, it's working, it's working. Okay, wait, we found a problem. So with science, it's rigid flexibility. You have to be able to bounce with the changes. And this virus has mutated so rapidly that it was faster than the science could keep up with. Also, I find it very ironic that the MAGA folks, the MAGA mob, not real Republicans, were screaming, "My body, my choice," with the masks and the vaccines. But they can't do the same with with abortion. It's say my body, my choice, and then turn around and say no. So the rollout, the vaccine distribution, the way they did it, the mass was fantastic, A+. The rest, a C. too many people died unnecessarily because politicians were warping the whole message, and their MAGA followers fought it tooth and nail just because Democrats weren't for it.
Okay. David, an area where Arizona leaders did well and areas where you think they failed when it comes to COVID?
I think Arizona kind of tried to follow a little bit of a middle path, maybe not quite as many rules and closures as California had, but maybe a little more than some other states. And I know several people personally who died of COVID, and that's a tragedy. It was a kind of a darned if you do, darned if you don't situation, and people are of course complaining about the effect on the economy, but a large number of more people dying than did die would have affected the economy also. So, people just sort of imagining we could have done nothing and everything would have been hunky dory for the economy, I think are greatly mistaken, and that might have affected businesses a lot more in the long run. My business is healthcare related, so we were deemed to be a necessary service, and we stayed open, but we did observe a lot of restrictions in there. We wore masks, we sprayed everything down constantly. If anybody was sick, we didn't let them come in, but we were able to stay open. I really have a lot of sympathy for people whose businesses were badly affected and sometimes totally shut down. And I hope that the stimulus checks helped them. I know, a lot of the club owners I know of places I play music at are back open again, luckily, and busy again. And a lot of them were doing roadside food delivery and even drink delivery, and all kind of interesting innovations came out of this. So COVID really changed the world. A lot of people working at home, and a lot of businesses are saying, hey, what do we need to maintain these expensive offices for? People can work at home, and COVID kind of sped all that up. COVID also greatly increased the medical research into a lot of things. The messenger RNA treatment was just being developed for cancer in Germany by a company owned by a Turkish couple, and they had literally just finished how to make the machine to make antibodies against specific antigens, I guess you would say. And they were able to change that from cancer and malaria research into treating COVID within a matter of weeks, which was a pretty amazing thing. So it all has applications, and because of the billions of dollars they pumped into mRNA research, that has wide applications to cancer treatment of all kinds, and may even end up with a cure of malaria, which is the biggest pathogen-borne disease in the world, I believe. I'm myself a cancer survivor, and I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma several times in my life, and I'll be very happy to see that come for myself and for a lot of people. But as far as the anti-vax and the anti-mask movements, solutions don't have to be perfect, and that's kind of a common propaganda trick, where if you don't want something at all, you say, oh well, it doesn't work perfect, and this doesn't work perfect, and that doesn't work perfect, and that's not an excuse. Seat belts don't prevent 100% of death, and neither do anti-drunk driving laws, and neither do airbags, but they all greatly reduce driving deaths, and that's why we have them as laws. They don't need to be perfect, and it's a thing that increases exponentially. If you let one person get sick unnecessarily, well, they could infect 100 other people, not just themselves. So the small changes in infection rates were very important at protecting a lot of lives, and I hope people continue thinking that way and not getting too frustrated with the rules we have and the changes that are still in place and whatever inconvenience might be necessary to them, because you could literally be killing somebody else by worrying more about your inconvenience than complying with a few simple laws.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about education, and I want to start off with something broad here. Do you believe Arizona's K-12 public education system as a whole is adequately funded? I'm going to guess that both of you say no. Tell me if I'm wrong. But if that's the case, if you don't think it's adequately funded, I would like to know how much more money is it going to take to get it to adequately funded, and where should we find that money? And try to be specific, please. And David, you're in the rotation.
Yeah, that's a hot topic in Arizona for sure. You know, a lot of people like their children to go to a private school education, and also magnet schools and all these other kind of, some of which sort of function as semi-private schools. But apparently there were a few bills. One bill that the public widely supported was to allow taxes to be paid by some of the very wealthy residents to be used for education. And that was voted by the public. And the Republicans in the state Senate just ignored it and said, you can't make us, and refused to obey the law. And that was also true of a law that they just passed regarding voting access. They just refused to recognize it, but, you know, which is also very sad. So there is money there, and there's also laws right now preventing the education budget from being raised to match costs. And this was some kind of anti-tax Jarvis kind of bill that was passed, obviously, in the legislature. And so they're sort of trying to starve out public education, meanwhile trying to hand out money to private schools with these vouchers. So it's kind of attacking publication on both ends, not letting it have enough funding on the one hand, letting teacher salaries drop too much, so we lose our good teachers, and then saying, well, guess what? We have the alternative to it. Here it is. So I really think people that want to send their children to private school should pay for it themselves. Everybody loves getting money, but the government's responsibility is to provide people with a reasonable public education, not fancy private school educations. And if people would like that, I believe that they can pay for that themselves. And the majority of those people are in a position to do so, and have the means to have that for their children. If that's what they want, I think that's great.
David, let me ask again, how much more money do you think Arizona needs, and where should we get it from?
Well, I couldn't tell you what the dollar figure is off the top of my head. I believe that the per student funding for Arizona is $7,000, something like that. And that's definitely lower than some states, lower than that, I believe it. So it should have been raised a long time ago, and the taxes need to be done to do so, rather than just tacking it on the budget.
Okay. Scott, can you tell us how much and where it should come from?
As far as the exact figure, that's what hearings and talking to the experts get you.
A ballpark.
Ballpark, half of what's going into private prisons.
Okay.
And also half of the voucher program needs to be turned around and put back into public schools. The amount of funding a school gets is based upon students and seats. And if you don't have a lot of students and seats, or if you have high absentee rates, then you're going to get less funding. You're going to be punished. This is just sabotaging our kids' opportunities. We need to increase the pay of our teachers. New Mexico is looking at passing a law paying $54,000 a year teachers. In Arizona, it's around 40. Even those teachers at the charter schools and private schools make about the same as public education teachers. A school gets about $6,500 per student. And a voucher school gets about $10,000 per student. And in the public education system, we have academic standards that we measure by testing. Voucher schools and private schools don't have that. They are held to a different set of laws than the public education system. And the Republicans will say, well, look how much cheaper it is for us to send kids over to this voucher school. Well, if you take away the state's responsibility for infrastructure, classroom maintenance, instruction materials, well, the voucher school program was essentially developed to get the state out of having to build new schools for expanding student populations. They passed that buck on to the private sector, and they're more than happy to keep shoveling money towards the private sector. They keep on saying, well, we don't like welfare. Well, our schools are all over saying, please, sir, may I have another? And the voucher schools are saying, well, here's one cookie for you and 5 cookies for me. That's how the state's doling out the money for education. And now with the expanded system, teacher or parents that are sending their kids to private school on their own dime are now applying for vouchers. And it's also going to start paying thousands of dollars to parents who homeschool. If you make the decision to homeschool, that's your call. You shouldn't get paid to do it. We also need to work with the unions on teaching the trades in high schools. When I went to school, I went through the industrial arts track. And it was a great benefit for me when I was in the Air Force because I had electronics background, which allowed me to be the go-to guy to fix a lot of airplanes. We need to be working with the unions to create the workforce that they need. And if a freshman in high school starts an apprenticeship program, they may be able to graduate as a journeyman when they graduate high school. We need to be looking at different ways. College isn't always the only option. There are the tradesmen, plumbers, carpenters, HVAC guys, they all make good money. Electricians make good money. And we need, as far as funding, we need a bottom to top reform in education, including mandatory pre-K education. Because with those early formative years, that's when we can really, really help that student out, get a head start of where we were when we were that age, and start learning the alphabet, start learning their numbers. They'd be so much farther ahead than we were at that age. But it's going to take a comprehensive reform effort with a lot of input from a lot of different people, a lot of different experts into these issues to come up with a fair, sustainable, long-term solution, because the current AEL is based on 1983 costs. So it will take a lot of work, a lot of time.
I was going to ask a question about the AEL, but it sounds like both of you have already kind of hit on that in your previous comments, that you would like to see that raised. Let me just ask quickly, eliminate it altogether, send it back to the voters, ask them to scrap it. Do you guys agree with that?
I think that the legislature should repeal that law. And we need to reinstitute the prop that the Supreme Court shot down, which was a non-constitutional action, because no governmental body has the right to change the will of the people. It's in the state constitution in Article 2. I think it's section 23. But the results and the integrity of those results must maintain. But the people that got rid of the proposition to be taxed were the very people that were going to get taxed. They didn't do it to help save money or do anything. They did it for their own personal needs and desires. They're looking out for their financial bottom lines by getting rid of something that was going to tax them. And the judges aren't any different. They all just went for their own bottom lines. They didn't want to get taxed. That's why they.
I wanted to add that, yeah, I think any artificial limits on education spending should be repealed. I think that's a bad idea. We need to respond to the times. Children need a higher tech education now than they did a few years ago. But I think there's lots of opportunities to continue online education. I think that's a good thing for many kids, especially if they're pursuing additional certificates. The one thing Arizona really lags behind is offering education for inmates. We have mostly private prisons here, and guess what? Private companies can't make money off of offering college degrees to prison inmates, so they'd rather just have a punitive system where when they're done back on the streets with no skills that they can market to get a job, and as a result, they're far more likely to return to criminal activities. So I really think every prison should have the major universities operating right out of it. The people there are a little older and more mature than they were when they were in high school. They have more of a motivation to learn and make something out of their life. And there's so many education programs that could greatly reduce recidivity. Am I saying that right? And I would really like to see that happen for their benefit, but also the benefit of all the people of the state to not live in a state that has problems with high crime.
Another thing that we need to do is, if a school is having problems and they're struggling and they have low test scores, instead of moving in and punishing them, putting them on probation, the state needs to reach out a helping hand and ask them and fund them for what they need. Instead of just punishing them, we need to work with that school, give them a helping hand, help them get back up to standard. And this is all about the kids. The kids don't deserve a dollar store education. We cannot nickel and dime the education anymore. We've got a huge state surplus. I think we can dip into that a little bit and help out these kids. You know, these school voucher programs, they work great in a big city like the Valley or Tucson. But what about those kids up in Page or over in Holbrook or Winslow, out on the reservation, Sholem? Those kids don't have a choice. And the Republicans are sabotaging their own kids' futures.
Okay, we're coming up close to an hour. I want to move along from education stuff to at least talk a little bit about water here. The Colorado River, as I'm sure you both are aware, does not, Arizona's water supply from the Colorado River has been severely curtailed in recent years. What I want to know is, do you support additional regulations on water use? And if so, should those regulations be on industry, on individuals, on both? What can we do to ensure that we have water in the desert going into the future?
Well, I have a water plan that's on my website, scottpodine.com. And this water plan includes working with the CAP Commission to find a way to reduce evaporation losses in the CAP canals. There's also a vast network of brackish water aquifers. Essentially, they're a little bit too salty. So we can use these aquifers, and there's one that stretches from Tucson up through Casa Grande, over along the I-8 corridor. Part of it comes up to Buckeye, and there's a very large one up on the Hopi Reservation. These resources can be tapped. But like I said before, as far as housing, we need to start pumping the brake on development. because we're not going to have sustainable water if population keeps exploding. We have to work together with the different municipalities to bring their treated water up to a drinkable standard, which can be done. Yes, it costs a little bit more, but it can be done. We need to work with agriculture, provide tax credits to agriculture, primarily family farms, not industrial groups, to convert over to drip irrigation, which is much more efficient. As far as water use, that's a federal issue. It falls under federal reserve rights, or out here in Arizona, it's called prior appropriations. It's essentially water law based upon mining law. And it's based upon the rights of your date. And water waste is anytime you use water for not its intended purpose. It's filling up a swimming pool with irrigation water. That's water waste. And also when the Corps builds a dam or a reservoir, it has a federal law behind it dictating the use of that facility. If it's for flood control and recreation, then that's what it has to be used for. As far as Lake Pleasant and Lake Roosevelt, they're for water storage and recreation. We can do this, and we can water bank. And if we can reduce the evaporation out the canals, we won't have to the water when it gets to Phoenix and Tucson isn't drinkable out of the caps. But I do have a plan. It's on scottpodine.com, and you can read it there. David?
Yeah, just I'm not quite the expert Scott is on this, but the drought has been going on 7 years, I believe, and it's very scary and it's very serious. Phoenix was already a water limited city, and now you've got a 7-year drought. I've read that 2/3 of that is agriculture, and I think we need to take a look at that to see how we can reduce water usage there. Apparently, there's been water usage by foreign countries here without paying anything for it, and that's wrong. The other thing is new companies. Everybody loves business, and everybody loves new companies working here and bringing jobs. But I just really wonder if there's anybody at the government level saying, okay, they want to build this however many 1,000 square foot factory. Where's the water going to come from? How are we going to get it? And people are going to move here to work at that factory. Where are they going to get their water? And the same thing when they build new neighborhoods. Everybody loves growth, but they have to make sure the water's in place for it. And if not, they have to use some real strategies to make sure those new neighborhoods and companies are sustainable.
Okay, we're coming right up on an hour, but we can't talk about the upcoming 2022 election without touching on the 2020 election. I assume both of you believe that Joe Biden won the 2020 election fair and square. You can tell me if I'm wrong on that.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
My question is, though, a huge part of the population does not believe that. How can you, if elected to the legislature, help turn that around?
I think I'm up. Yeah, I think the process of the election was honest and fair, and it was proven so again and again. And the Republican Party conducted their own audit, and that audit also proved that the election was fair, and proved in fact that Joe Biden got more votes than, I believe it was 130 more votes than counted previously. So all these people claiming these things, it's like, where's the beef? It's coming up on 2 years and there hasn't been any. So the people, I think, are believing things they hear too readily because it sort of pushes the right buttons for them, rather than actually looking at any facts or evidence. There's been 70 lawsuits, and every one of them failed to get past the initial phase because the judge asked for evidence and they didn't have any. They have online rumors, and they have speculation, and they have people claiming anecdotal things online, but there's nothing behind it. So the best thing we can do from here out is just to make sure that the elections are as transparent and open and honest as we can, and make everybody feel like their vote is being counted and their concerns are being taken seriously, as they should be.
Okay, Scott?
Well, gee, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And sometimes as a veteran, I have a lot of veteran friends, and I could talk to them blue in the face in circular arguments about how the election was fair, how it was secure, the integrity of the election was maintained. And it was over, and it all starts from one childish 79-year-old man that refuses to accept he lost. And this man was so bitter and so angry that he stole government documents. He attempted a coup. He wanted to have the military take over machines. And this whole non-issue with a bunch of people that refused to accept the fact that Trump lost. If the Democrats had manipulated the election so well, then how come Democrats screwed up and didn't take every house in the seat in the Senate and the House? How come Democrats didn't take every seat? Well, it's because the election wasn't rigged, it wasn't manipulated. Venezuela wasn't involved. There were Jewish space lasers zapping vote Trumps out of the air. It's just a bunch of nonsense coming from a childish old man.
All right. I think that's we're about out of time here, but I want to give you guys a few minutes to kind of wrap up, let the voters know who you are, remind them. Take a couple minutes each for your closing statements here.
I'll go ahead, I guess.
Yeah, I went first last time. Go ahead, David.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm new to politics. I've never run for office before. I've never even worked on a campaign before, but I've just had a lifelong interest in politics. Even when I was in high school in the 1970s, I was reading the paper from front to back almost every day. And I studied English literature in college, and as a result of that, studied lots of writing and some journalism. And I just have a belief that fair and honest journalism is extremely important, and that the public deserves to know the truth. Real journalists risk their lives every day, and sometimes lose their lives trying to bring the truth to the world. And we shouldn't have a cottage industry of people purposely telling falsehoods that they know are false in order to make money. And that's unfortunately what has happened with the repeal of the Fairness Act. And I think the result of that is sort of just the gradual poisoning of our political system. And I think America's always been very proud of our political system, where everybody has a right and everybody has an equal say, in a sense, with their vote. And we can't have that without a free and fair media that is also responsible and held to some kind of standards. So, but really, the real reason I ran in this district is because I believe its last 3 elections, there was not a Democrat candidate at all. There was Kathy Kinesh, who was an independent Democrat. But again, I saw that this election this year was again going to be only a Republican on the Senate ballot. And I just decided that was wrong and said, yeah, we're in a democracy. This isn't Bulgaria or Hungary. We're supposed to have multiple candidates on the ballot. And even if the numbers say it's a tough district and I may lose, I'm still going to run to give people a choice, to give people a voice in their government and a feeling that they're connected to the Arizona governmental system, which makes so many important decisions in our life.
Okay, thanks a lot, David. Scott?
I was happily retired playing golf and working on my golf business of repairing golf clubs until the legislature started bringing up, we're going to give ourselves the power to veto your vote. Partisan body should never have that power. They have their only responsibility is to listen to the will of the voter and to follow the will of the voter. You don't like the results, well, maybe next time you need to do something differently. If I lose this time, then I'm going to have to do something differently. But I'm running because I cannot allow the Republicans to pick and choose which parts of the Constitution they want to follow. You got to follow all of it, all 25 amendments. You got to follow all 3 articles. And you have to agree that these are the rules. If you don't like it, then we can change it. We have to follow the state constitution. And much of what they want to propose is in violation of the state's constitution. The Republicans like to bring up states' rights. And if you read, I ask everybody to go out and read the 10th Amendment. And it essentially says, if it's covered in the Constitution, it's not up to the states to decide. If it's under federal law, then we can look at it. But if it's covered under the Constitution, it's not up to the states to decide. It's about what's fair and about what's right. It's what's the honorable thing to do? What benefits the most people? Politics is about someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. Well, the majority need to win. And the majority of the people are not wealthy, but that's how the system is benefiting people. It's benefiting the top. It's just like my opponents want to eliminate the income tax. My question is, how are they going to replace $6 million of revenue lost? Well, they're going to raise every single one of the taxes that they can: gas taxes, property taxes, sales taxes, registration taxes, and anything else that they could think of to tax. And then, even after those taxes go up, it's not going to be enough to meet the shortfall. So they're going to start cutting services. And they're going to start cutting child welfare. They're going to start cutting SNAP, WIC, et cetera. Every safety net that we have to help people that live in food deserts, healthcare deserts, childcare deserts. Those are the people the government has a duty to serve. And going back to election integrity is critical. The results must be followed and must be accepted. May not like it, but you're just going to have to eat it. As we used to say in the Air Force, you're just going to have to shut up and color. But I will block every attempt that Republicans might make to block or give themselves the authority to alter the results of an election after the results have been certified. I'm Scott Podine, and I'd be humbled and honored for your vote this upcoming election. I'm a one-shot candidate. I'm one Democrat against 2 Republicans. You don't have to fill out 2 bubbles. Just fill out my bubble and ignore the other 2 guys.
Okay. Well, that concludes tonight's event. And to the candidates who made the time to be here, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the November 8th election. As a reminder, voter registration deadline is October 11th and early voting begins October 12th. All registered voters can participate in the general election, and we encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for your time tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.